This is a folder. And you also call this a folder, but it's actually something very different. Both folders hold documents. Both folders can be put inside of other folders, and both folders can be arranged on the top of a desk, otherwise known as a desktop. You can even cut or copy from one document and paste it to another. However, this folder and this document are really just directories and files, made up of bits and bytes just like everything else in software. But since directories are called folders, we know how to interact with them because we already know how to interact with their physical counterparts. This is an example of a helpful and effective interface metaphor. An interface metaphor is a set of user interface visuals and interactions that build on the knowledge that users already have from another domain, such as the physical world. A designer uses an interface metaphor to enable a user to interact with a system that would otherwise be completely foreign to them. Interface metaphors can be a great example of the power of language in design. Language shapes the landscape of the designed world, influencing how we interact with and understand information technologies. Folders are a relatively benign and helpful example of how tech influences you with language. But it can get much darker and, well, cloudier, so stay tuned. In the 1950s, computers didn't have screens, and they mostly took input in the form of punch cards. Those computers were specialized tools used only by those specifically trained to use them. In the 1960s, computers started having very low-resolution screens and took keyboard input, but they were still a far cry from what you would consider a computer today. In the 1970s, Xerox PARC changed the game and the world. At the Palo Alto Research Center, the metaphors for the desktop, documents, and folders were part of a larger system of metaphors that formed the basis for how we interact with computers today. In order to make computers usable for the everyday person, Xerox PARC researchers cleverly relied on metaphors from the physical world. And these metaphors were the building blocks for the graphical user interface, or GUI, which is how you interact with what you today probably know as a computer. Fast forward to the 1990s, when what you would think of as a computer is becoming much more widespread, being found in homes and businesses across the US. E-commerce, or online shopping, was gaining its foothold and needed to be user-friendly. Enter another user interface metaphor, the shopping cart. In e-commerce, the shopping cart builds on our understanding of how real shopping carts work in the physical world. You can put anything you want in the cart, you can take it out at any time, and putting something in your shopping cart does not mean you're actually going to buy it. Imagine trying to build a comparable e-commerce system without leveraging existing understanding of a physical shopping cart. It would be really, really hard. Maybe you'd have something like a list of items I might buy, or LOIMB. Users would have to start from scratch and learn and memorize how to use the LOIMB. They'd have to learn how to understand adding things to the LOIMB. They might ask questions like, am I going to be committed to buying this thing once it's in the LOIMB? Am I able to remove things from the LOIMB? If I leave the store and then come back, is my LOIMB still going to be there, or do I start fresh? Relying on the recognition of the shopping cart, users don't have to rely on learning and recall of the LOIMB in order to use the e-commerce system. When there is little recognition of familiarity, a user has to learn how to use a tool from scratch, and then recall that information every time they use it. By using a metaphor, designers can bypass that learning step and tap directly into people's memories or mental models. Language may also reveal or conceal less desirable characteristics of information systems. Safari, Amazon, eBay. Notice anything? The names are all related to concepts around exploration and geography. Keith Obadike is a musician, composer, professor, and media artist whose 2001 piece Blackness for Sale commented on a pattern he observed in how the language used in e-commerce uncovered some of its darker attributes. He said in an interview, "I didn't really see artists dealing with this intersection of commerce and race. I really wanted to comment on this odd Euro-colonialist narrative that exists on the web and Black people's position within that narrative. I mean, there are browsers called Explorer and Navigator that take you to explore the Amazon or trade in the eBay. It's all just too blatant to ignore. Intentional or not, the language used in designed systems can invoke the systems from the physical, cultural, and historical worlds that created them. Etymology and connotations matter, and may betray a pattern in a system that would rather remain hidden. In the context of historical colonialism and Black people's disadvantaged place in capitalism and globalization, tech company and product names centered on exploration and geography are at best just a little weird, and at worst an admission that the global economy is performing business as usual and profiting off the marginalized. Speaking of the global economy and geography, it's time to talk about one of my favorite topics, the cloud. Now, you might have a vague notion of the cloud as the place where your backup files are stored, but it's much more than that. The language you use to describe it minimizes what it actually is, and there's a lot more to it than what some people may want us to know. What we generally refer to as the cloud is a vast interconnected system of infrastructure, supporting not only data storage, but also computing power. It consists of millions of individual computer servers running in thousands of data centers around the world, connected by hundreds of thousands of miles of fiber optic cable running across the land and under the sea. It's a network built on stability through redundancy. There's something duplicitous in our understanding of the cloud, caused almost entirely by its namesake alone. Clouds in nature are ephemeral, transitory, and nearly weightless. Thanks to its name, we think of the data held in the cloud as vaporous and taking up no real space. In reality, however, the cloud relies on very real physical infrastructure and labor. It is created and maintained by very tangibly connected submarine cables, data centers, human workers, and natural resources. The language used for the system allows a blind eye to be turned to some of its darker attributes. For example, according to postdoctoral researcher Stephen Gonzalez Monserrati, the electricity consumed by data centers contributes a significant carbon footprint. For data centers specifically, it's something like 0.5% of greenhouse gas emissions globally. But if you extend that to include everything the internet touches, including devices, transmitters, internet exchange centers, so everything that actually is the cloud, it makes up something like 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which is the equivalent of the airline industry. You ever feel how hot your laptop gets when you've been running it for a while? Imagine a whole building filled with computer servers. Data centers require a lot of cooling. And for this, they turn to water. On average, a single data center can consume anywhere from 3 to 10 million gallons of water a day, equivalent to the population of a small town. This may not be sustainable in the long run, as about 20% of data centers in the United States are located in watersheds that are vulnerable, either in a state of active drought or under severe water stress. Because of its name, you might not think anything of the gigabytes of photos you store in the cloud, and not think about its impact. The cloud's innocent-sounding name seems to allow it to benefit certain people at the direct expense of others. On a smaller scale, how does naming actually happen for a designed information system? As a product designer myself, I can give you a mini sneak peek. I was once at a tech company where a bunch of internal tools were built by engineers, and loosely connected by the one internal application that supported them all that had no clear vision. The only connecting thread between these tools was that in one way or another, they were all used to test and set variables around clients' data. The application had an unclear and mouthy name, and since it was growing by the day as more and more engineers added tooling to it, another designer and I decided it was time to give it some purpose, direction, and a proper name. We facilitated a structured naming session with key participants including developers and users of the tools. And we landed on a name that evoked a board of switches. The name acted not only as a more accurate descriptor of the system itself, it also gave it a clear vision and purpose. From that point on, the name immediately stuck, and the development on the tools in it took on a much more purposeful and connected scope. What was once a disconnected series of tools that happened to exist in the same application was now a purpose-driven product. Language is incredibly powerful in guiding people's imaginations, expectations, and collaboration. From interface metaphors to company, concept, and product names, language is constantly influencing our interactions with and understanding of information systems. Tung-Hui Hu said it best about the cloud. Today, of course, the cloud has become so naturalized in everyday life that we tend to look right through it, seeing it uncritically, if at all. I hope this video helps you look critically at things that we're so used to we don't even notice them. Maybe next time when you find yourself interacting with an information technology, you might ask yourself, how is language here influencing my behavior or understanding? Let me know in the comments about other examples of the power of language in design. Thanks for watching.